you could like name it something and then have like a colon and then just like what we talk
And
about.
then the oh yeah, so name colon name of the game or name of Pokemon Presents or whatever.
Yeah.
Elephant bacon.
The critique.
No.
The observation.
The observer.
The observer, maybe.
No, because that makes it sound like I'm the observer.
Yeah.
Cleanup crew.
Commentary. Just name it commentary.
Yeah, right. I kind of like the idea of cleanup crew because what do? We go clean up the backlog. I don't know.
Yeah. Because I'm just trying to think. I don't know because we talked about event.
Yeah.
Yeah. No matter how you want to put it, it's gonna be like a podcast, but that's not a bad thing.
No. I kind of dig it.
Like I said, put it on Spotify. I feel like whatever. See how it does.
Maybe cleanup crew. Something's drawing me to that. I don't know what it is. So anyway, we finished playing The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD, and we're here to talk about it. First up, I figured we could dive into the gameplay mechanics and just mechanics in general, kind of breaking this discussion up into a couple different parts, mainly saving spoilers and kind of story talk for the very end. I will admit, this is our second time recording this. Because the first time, the audio died. Well, my audio recording for you died.
Yeah.
So, whoops. My hard drive basically disconnected itself from the computer and was like, nah, we don't want to be connected to you. So, lost all that audio and quit.
After like an hour.
After like an hour of discussion, yeah. So, hopefully today goes a little bit better. I'm hoping so. So I figure first up we could talk about the big elephant in the room when it comes to this game. It comes to the Wii version, and it comes to the Switch version. Motion controls. So I will be the first to say I did not play the original Wii version. I played probably a handful of minutes when you're still on Skyloft, and that was about it. And because of that, I made the great decision, also kind of based off of your decision, that I would play the whole game in motion controls. And it wasn't awful. At least I don't think so.
I mean, that's one way to put it.
It wasn't awful, yeah. But you decided to play it just with the regular Joy-Cons. Or you played it handheld, right?
Yeah, I played it handheld. I pretty much played the whole game handheld mode. I put it on, connected my TV for a moment just to see what I thought of the motion controls, because the original game I played up to like just before the Forest Temple, and I just stopped. I couldn't take the controls because it just didn't feel, during the time, by that point it didn't feel like a much of like a Zelda game to me. Which I come to realize that I should have just kept playing because it does pick up.
Yeah, no. I definitely agree. This being my first time playing through it, I really had a tough time with the beginning of it. I thought both it was really slow, and it just I wasn't. You're right. It wasn't quite clicking with me. It wasn't quite what a Zelda game had been up to at that point. I mean, if you look at Ocarina of Time, that for me that's always the gold standard. I know you prefer Majora's Mask, but for me, like Ocarina of Time, you go get your sword and shield, and then you straight line beeline it for the Great Deku Tree, and you're right in. Like that's, if you know what you're doing, it's like 15 minutes at most. It's just interesting they spend so much time in the beginning of the game describing the controls to you, and I mean, I guess they have to, because at the time this was the first motion controlled Zelda game.
That's true. Yeah, and like you're saying, Ocarina of Time, You leave your house, you go down. Everyone in the town basically tells you some game control.
Yeah.
That's up to you. In this game, it's like they tell you to do all this stuff with controls. Like you have to climb up on the wall, climb around it. You have to look around, and you have to go find that cat kind of monkey thing.
Yeah, the cat thing. Yeah.
And it's like I don't know. I do think that it is necessary on the Wii, but in this game, I feel like it should have just been completely skippable.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things where I guess if you think about it, when this original game came out, original release of Skyward Sword on the Wii, that was 2011. 2011, so 10 years ago.
Hmm. Yeah,
And the
I was just finishing middle school, going to
oh,
high
that's
school.
right. That's right. That's another reason why I didn't play. Yeah, it was just I was a senior in high school, and I was definitely at the point in my life where I was like, Nintendo games aren't cool. When I realized I should have been playing all the Nintendo games because there's so many I never experienced. So that's my fault.
That's a problem today. It's like it's hard to go back to some of them because if they don't port them like they did Skyward Sword HD, you have to have the old hardware or the emulation just has to be good, but at the same time you have to have all the emulation equipment if you want to have the original experience, like the original controller.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's one thing. It's kind of a blessing and a curse, is that I have a Wii U, but they've been porting literally everything from the Wii U to the Switch. There's a handful of games that haven't been ported over, like Skyward Sword or Twilight
Skyward
Princess
Sword.
HD. Yeah, I know, Twilight Princess HD and Wind Waker HD. So those haven't been ported over yet, which rumor is they might, but who know? Who knows? But yeah, it would definitely was a regret that I didn't spend enough time with this back then, and even from you, like saying that you didn't spend enough time with it either, and wish you would have finished it.
Yeah. Yep. I had just gone back a couple half a year ago and I played through Wind Waker HD. I had never finished Wind Waker up until that point, and that was one of the last Zelda games I had finished. That was the last Zelda game I finished before this, and
Oh yeah,
it was a
okay.
fabulous game, just great.
It's interesting because the last Zelda game I finished prior to this, I think, was actually Wind Waker for me also. But I did it years ago on this channel where I did a Let's Play of it. So it's been many, many years since I played a Zelda game. Or, well, not played, but finished a Zelda game. And it was an emulated version of the GameCube, so I didn't have the Swift sale. I was stuck with the regular sale. But as for this game in particular, obviously the motion controls are a big like sticking point. Like everyone kind of poo-poos on it. But I'm curious to hear you, because obviously the biggest issue I had with the motion controls, it was genuinely fine to play with most of the time. But my biggest complaint was that every time I wanted to wield the sword normally, it would be in a different angle, because if I slightly moved my body, you would change the axis of the Joy-Con, and then it wouldn't know where center was anymore, so you had to press Y constantly to go bling 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 and recenter yourself. So there's audio throughout the entire time of me recording my gameplay of constantly hitting the recenter button to be like, no, the sword's supposed to go here. No, the sword's supposed to go here. So when you do your skyward strike, I'm guessing on an analog stick, would you just press up, or how does that work?
Yeah, you just hold up.
I see with the Joy-Con, you had to actually raise the Joy-Con straight up. But if it's off center, Link kind of just like stick his arm out at a weird angle, and you have to point it back, press Y, then hold it up.
Yeah, so I played for a moment with the motion controls. I found it frustrating because compared to Mario Galaxy on the uh, Mario All 3D All Stars collection, that collection you press the same button to recenter, but most of the time you weren't in combat. In this game, anytime your motion controls came off center, you would have to recenter. But if you're in the middle of a fight and that happens, Oh, you're
Oh,
at a huge disadvantage.
Yeah, no, you're at a huge disadvantage, but you're still hitting that. Bling, you're still hitting that little, little
Yeah.
Y button to recenter, even while you're fighting things.
Yeah, and so the thing in when I played Galaxy on Switch, it didn't make a noise. So that's kind of frustrating to hear that it makes a noise because I didn't play with motion controls enough during this to remember that. But yeah, no, that would definitely drive me crazy for how many times I reset my centering on Galaxy.
Because with Galaxy, I'm guessing it's the same issue. That you run into that same issue porting Wii games that depended on the Wiimote, where you have your pointer, and the Joy-Con for the most part does a decent job with the pointer, but like you said, it becomes off center sometimes, so you have to recenter it. But that little pling that it makes drives me nuts. Because even during cutscenes where, like, leading into a boss where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna recenter my sword because I know I'm gonna be fighting him, it'll be like showing like this big boss entrance, then you hear bling because I'm recentering it while I'm waiting for the boss to start. I'm like, oh. So there's, again, tons of times where I hear that. But
Yeah.
as for the motion controls were obviously a bit of a headache, but when they worked, It was fun. I want to know your experience with the gamepad controls, because outside of running around and maybe doing the same amount of testing with actual gamepad controls, I didn't really do much. I swung the sword a little bit and then went back to using motion controls. What did you think about the gamepad controls?
So, at the start, I tried both controls, and both of them set me off. I was like, I'm going to have the same problem as I did on the Wii, either way. But I committed to just using button controls because I would be laying down, playing in handheld mode most of the time. And the one thing that was hardest to just adjust to was holding down the L button for like the shoulder L button, like the bumper. And that's the only way you could like free control the camera. Well, when it came to needing to use my sword, sometimes I would have my finger still held on the button, or sometimes I'd forget to hold the button and I would just start swinging and move my sword around in directions when I meant to move the camera. And it became a headache, but when you got used to it, it was very natural. The controls, when it came to puzzles, when it was just like, oh, you have to maybe rotate the sword in like a circle, it was so easy on the button controls. No headache at all.
That's super fascinating, because I never thought about that. Like, of course, your right analog stick is being taken up by the sword controls. Like, how the heck are you gonna move your camera around? Because I'm sitting here, I was the whole time you were talking about it, I was like, oh, well, you just move your right analog stick. But no, that's your sword control. That's so bizarre. It kind of controls like you played Resident Evil 4, right?
On which?
I don't know. Because anything but the Wii, essentially.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So remember how you would run around as Leon, and then whenever you wanted to aim your gun, you had to hold your trigger, look down sights, and move around. Then you could move around. Is it kind of like that, where you had to hold down L? Was it left bumper or was it left trigger? Because left trigger, I'm guessing, is target, right? Lock on.
Yes.
So left bumper, you have to hold in order to move around. That would make me so upset. I would get so frustrated by that.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that by the time I got to the first dungeon, I was like, okay, I get it.
Okay,
but it just
so
it takes some like mental wiring to just be like, okay.
Okay, that's, yeah. I might actually go back and try it again just for the sake of seeing what it's like, because that just sounds really weird to me. Because one of the things that I did get annoyed by with the motion controls when it came to like camera work is, say you're using some of the items that you got in this game. So like, say you're using the slingshot and you're using motion controls, again, you have to recenter, so you go bling, and it points it back to the center of the screen. But then if you start moving with the analog, with the Joy-Con, like it's fine, it's just aiming. But if you move the camera with the right analog stick while pointing with the Joy-Con, it gets all freaked out, and I kept finding myself getting the Joy-Con like out of whack, and it wouldn't point straight, and I'd have to recenter again.
It's interesting. Yeah, when it comes to using like the slingshot, it's actually the best of both worlds using button controls because I could use the gyroscope to help aim, to make those subtle adjustments if I wanted to shoot a target. But I could use the analog stick for the more, if I need to just turn my body complete like a 180.
Yeah.
It would be simple. It's a simple like analog stick movement, but then if I need to kind of really aim for like a bullseye, I could just slightly make the movement with the gyro. It was nice.
No kidding. Okay, yeah, I had no idea. It makes sense, but I had no idea. Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's another check for the box of using a pro controller or just the what do you call it, docked Joy-Cons or in handheld mode. That's super interesting.
But the motion controls are classic. It is how the game was originally intended.
Yeah, I just remember videos of Miyamoto trying it at E3 and it just not working.
Telling everybody to turn off their cellular devices.
Yeah, exactly. It
was good.
So one last motion control thing I wanted to bring up, and general controlling thing I wanted to bring up was flying your loft wing, because it's a huge part of the thing. It's a huge part of the game, and a lot more emphasis than I thought there would be. For some reason, I thought it would just be oh, here's your travel companion, but like no, they actually flesh it out in the story, and like there's a reason for them being there, and it's a super fascinating aspect of the world that's being developed. But when it came to flying the thing with motion controls, again, the ever so aggressive pling from recentering your controllers there. But one of the things I found really annoying was trying to flap up, where in most games to fly up you press A or whatever button to ascend. This you had to shake the Joy-Con like whip it like up and down, and it made them flap. But like when you flicked it down like that, it also wobbles, and because, as I said, if you wobble the Joy-Con, it becomes off center, so then you start flying crooked. So every time I'd want to fly or ascend, I'd have to ascend a bunch and then bling and then recenter everything.
I guess I didn't investigate that because that's the moment I quit using motion controls after just 3 minutes of testing it.
Okay.
Was when I was trying to fly that loft wing, and I didn't realize that to flap upwards you had to shake it. So I thought you could still press the A button, because in the button mapping you just press A to flap, you press X or Y to, I think Y to which is your recenter button, to dash, and it was just so comfortable. But then when I was doing motion controls, I'm like, it's just inconvenient. I wish there was a setting that I could choose button mapping for loft wing and motion controls for gameplay. I would have given motion controls more of a chance.
I know, 100%. I agree with everything you just said, where if you could have mixed and matched somehow, it would have. But Nintendo's never been the kind of company to allow you to mix and match. As accessibility in games becomes more of an important topic, which I wholeheartedly agree with, it's one of those things where Nintendo is Nintendo, and they've always been kind of an old school kind of thing, where I think the reason we didn't see Skyward Sword sooner was because they were like, how the crap do we convert this into because they couldn't have done it with the Wii U unless they just went all, they said, no, you have to use just gamepad. Or could you use the Wii with Wii controller with Wii U games? I can't remember.
You could.
You could? Okay, so I guess that would have been the solution there.
Yeah, but I feel like you could have both working at the same time. So Switch recognizes the Pro controller as a second controller. If you have both connected at the same time, you can't have both as player one.
Mm-hmm.
By Wii U, you could have the gamepad and the Wii remote connected as player one if the game said so. Which I feel like the Switch could do, but that's not how it's laid out to be.
So I guess given the hardware they have now, they did do the best they could, but I agree that it would have been probably god tier if they were able to allow you to mix and match somehow. Again, what is that? What form does that take? I don't know. I'm no game designer or anything, but I'd imagine you'd be able to mesh it somehow.
Yeah, something I know that they definitely don't support right now is the just reassigning buttons. But
Yeah,
but this I feel like is more of an understandable, as you were saying, accessibility kind of feature because you know a lot of players it's like Xbox really supports accessibility in games.
Oh, 100%.
Uh, they even have specialized controller for it, but when it comes to motion controls, it's like they give you button controls but motion controls also, but it's like, well, what if somebody has a condition where they can use motion controls sometimes and they
Yeah.
want to experience it with the loft wing. Well, they have to set you can do it, you can change it, but it's it would be easier if you could just preset how you'd like to control your loft wing.
Make your hybrid approach. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I totally agree. So I guess kind of moving away from the loft wings and the general controls and moving more into kind of how the game actually plays as a whole, meaning the new features of the games, the new ways that the game mimics a certain new modern game that kind of had me pleasantly surprised, as well as I kind of want to tackle some of our favorite items and pieces of equipment this time around, and how some of those are a little different compared to some of the other Zelda games and things we've never seen before and probably will never see again. So I figure we probably could start there because it's a little bit more of an easy topic. So
yeah, sure.
So, some of the items, I am blown away that something like a flying beetle or a big bag of wind or a whip feel as good as they do in this game. I'm just shocked. I personally loved the new whip. I think out of all the items in this game, including like the bow and like the normal Zelda things, I think the whip was my favorite. Just something so satisfying about being able to actually have the motion control to move it around and feel like I'm actually like Indiana Jonesing stuff, like a switch, and like whoosh, and pulling it back to myself.
Yeah, so that's something that about the whip that I didn't get to experience because I never went back to the motion controls. I was just used to just pressing up on the analog stick to just whip. Nothing special. It was just a one action thing for me.
Yeah.
And then the one part I was stuck on with that was whenever I had to use the whip sideways. Well, I trained myself to just whip it forward.
Yeah.
Until I've realized, oh, I have to whip it sideways. I got stuck on a puzzle for like 5 minutes because I was like, what? I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? It doesn't the trigger doesn't move anywhere. Well, it turns out I have to whip
so
sideways. I didn't.
Yeah, no,
I didn't know it.
And that's something I guess inherent with motion controls, where I think I know the thing you're talking about. We can save some of that for once we cross into the spoilers. But I think I know the puzzle you're talking about, where I got to that point and I looked at it and there was no second guessing. I was like, oh, and I just throw my arm like sideways and he grabs it and I pull it back. And sure, it's a 2-action thing, but it's like easy. I did it without even thinking.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you know exactly the puzzle.
Yeah. But it's interesting because, like I said, there's some. Obviously, all of these were designed with motion controls in mind, because you had as I've said, the bow and arrow, the slingshot, the whip, the beetle, which I'll let you talk about the beetle, because I remember you saying last time we tried to record this that you kind of dug it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the beetle was my favorite because I found it very easy to control with the analog stick, instead of like, oh, if my centering isn't right, I might be end up holding my control pointed at myself or something like that. It was just always just a nice, just kind of aircraft moving kind of uh, item, and the things that it could do was just nice. Just like I was quick to discover, oh, it can cut down trees, it can uh, it can pick up bombs, and that was my favorite feature of that was when you could pick up the bombs and hold down just a button to get an aerial like bird's eye view of it, and then drop it. It was just nice to control with button controls.
Yeah, that was. I remember those puzzles also. Is that it was super satisfying because you press. For me, it was pressing the left trigger ZL. I think
it was the same, I believe.
This is ZL,
yeah.
and it like did that top down view with a little arch. I was like, oh, this is so cool. It's like a bombing run kind of thing.
Did you have to shake the control to drop it?
No. It was just I think it was an A press. I think it was just pressing A to let go. So while you're in that mode of looking down over top with the little arrow arching, you, if I remember correctly, you tilt. So if you're holding the Joy-Con in your hand, you're not waggling it left to right. You're like tilting it along its own axis. I don't know how to describe it other than just kind of doing it without you being able to see. Instead of taking the front of it and moving that left and right, you're like rocking it, basically. If I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, you're rocking it, and like rocking it left makes him turn left, and rocking it right makes him turn right. And that was the other thing I ran into with a lot of the motion controls, where sometimes I didn't really understand how it worked. I just assumed that it worked that way, and I just was able to get past certain things. Because sometimes it is a little finicky and it doesn't really work all the time.
Yeah. Button controls, it was just, there was no question about it not working. It was just moving. It was like I said, moving, like in a Star Fox game, controlling Fox's ship. Just a control.
It just worked as intended. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the gust item, the wind bag item. That I feel could have. After you mentioned it, I feel like that could have been more fun with motion controls. But again, it was just a standard, just kind of move in the direction you want to shoot it, but you could also use the gyro to help aim.
It's funny you say that, because out of all of the items I got most annoyed with using motion controls, that was number one. I hated that one the most. Because it was such a, like, you always pointed it at the ground. I mean, there was a few instances of some puzzles, like spinning little fans to get you through certain areas, and you're pointing them up. But I found myself getting so irritated because I was doing the thing I mentioned before, where I'd move the camera with the right analog stick, and also move the reticle on screen, and it would just go all out of whack, and I'd get so upset, like, oh, this is irritating. So it was definitely not my favorite, and it's definitely an item I don't see coming back. I'm glad it was tried, but its uses, I think, were pretty few and far between. I could see something like the Gale Boomerang from Twilight Princess being like essentially the same thing and more versatile.
Yeah, I feel like that one was that. What was it? That gear Beyblade kind of.
The Beyblade one.
Yeah, I feel like those two, the Beyblade one in Twilight Princess and this gust item, I feel like those are in line for like just being it's a cool thing that it has, but kind of staying in its own.
Yeah, and it's staying in its own time, and like it's super specific use cases. Where
like in the Deku Leaf.
But it's interesting because the Deku Leaf, handled the same things, but it's interesting how, with the exception of Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild had something similar. In this one, it has the sail, or the cloth, where you can't fly around with it, but you just drop down safely. But in Breath of the Wild, you use the parasail thing, the paraglider, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, I think they call it like a parasail.
So it's interesting. I think that's my favorite aspect of gaming in general, but the Zelda series specifically, how it's just all building. Like you see pieces and the DNA from one game leach into the other, and then into the next and the next and the next. And I think, to me, Skyward Sword is like the epitome, is like the one that, and it is like the final domino pushing over to become Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, so it definitely continues from it carries that what was to be Breath of the Wild, as in, like you were saying, the stamina bar earlier, to the sail, the cloth. And then it's kind of interesting because I'm curious if Breath of the Wild 2, for the footage we've seen so far up to August 19th is the time we're recording this.
Yeah.
It's we've seen that the next game is going to have these like sky islands, like just like Skyloft, and the islands around Skyloft. So I'm very curious if Skyward Sword is really going to have that much more of an influence in Breath of the Wild later on too.
That's a really good point. I totally forgot about that. They had sky islands in that. Mm-hmm. That's a super, super good point. I'm curious if Calamity Ganon or whoever it is comes back, or some form of some other, calamity thing comes back and starts, wreaking havoc, and maybe forces some of the land up. But also, wouldn't it be cool if Skyloft, the original piece that was up from the very beginning of the series, because Skyward Sword is game 1, if it falls back down to Earth and as Link we're able to get up there somehow.
True, and it would be cool if like the main villain of the game was if it moved into the final boss of Skyward Sword had an influence in Breath of the Wild 2. That'd be really exciting.
That would be really good, like to kind of complete the circle. That would be really, really cool.
Yeah.
And you touched on it with the mechanics that we saw directly influence Breath of the Wild, where this game was the first one to implement a stamina bar. It has durability on its shields. I think that's it. Those are the major two, because there's no weapon durability. You just have your main sword throughout the game, and that eventually turns into I guess I won't spoil it yet. It turns into something that's really iconic. And it's just interesting that even in Breath of the Wild, any weapon can break. Anyway, it's one of those things. When I first played it, I was like, "Oh, this sucks." It really turned me off from it, and I really had a hard time. And because of that, I still never finished Breath of the Wild. But after playing this and seeing those mechanics in action and seeing them in their infancy, and admittedly watching some people play Breath of the Wild on YouTube, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll give it a second go.
Even in Breath of the Wild, when you do Trial of the Sword, even the Master Sword breaks in that game.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. It's very fascinating. While they implement, so like the shields would always break in like Zelda games, right? If you had a wooden shield like in Ocarina of Time, it could break,
it would
burn away from like a fiery bat or something. But in this one, it does the same thing with the wooden shield, but then even the shields after that can break. And it kind of took me off guard, to be honest, because I didn't expect that. I expected that when I bought the upgraded shield, it wouldn't break, and I could just go about the game and just like that. But no, there's even more shields later that I didn't even pick up.
Yeah, we can touch on that, because I don't think it's as much of a spoiler, because every Zelda game has it. It's the Hylian shield. You can get it by doing a special boss rush mode where you fight the bosses a certain number of times, or you fight them in succession rather. And as far as I could tell, I honestly didn't play much of the game like holding the shield up and blocking stuff. I parried a lot, but I don't think that, at least with the Hylian shield, I don't think it took away any damage from it. And what damage it did take away, it healed itself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it did show maybe it took damage, do you think?
I would have to go back and look at the footage or look online, because I genuinely don't remember. It was one of those things you get at the end of, or towards the end of the game, and there's not really much left to use it with. Like, it'd be different if you used it over the course of the game, but I used it at the very tail end of it.
Yeah.
So I genuinely don't remember.
Yeah, I just finished the game with that basic second shield because I didn't know that you could get future shields.
Yeah,
Again.
yeah, no, yeah, it's one of those things that if you don't know or don't really care, then it really won't affect you. You can still finish the game with relative ease, but it definitely does make the final encounter way easier. And one thing that I do want to bring up before kind of moving into story and spoiler talk and like dungeons and bosses and things is the performance of the game. Because with Breath of the Wild, granted it was a launch game, but that runs at, I don't even think it runs at 1080p, does it? At maybe 900p?
No. Yeah, something like that. It's like 8900.
It's like 900p docked and 720p handheld, and it runs at 30 FPS, right?
Yeah. Well, no,
Yeah. So
does Breath of the Wild run at 30?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it does. Because I know it runs even slower on Wii U. Granted, on Wii U it ran like a PowerPoint presentation, but so Breath of the Wild runs at 720p handheld, 900p docked, but 30 FPS. But it's interesting that this game, as far as I'm aware, runs at 1080p, 60 FPS. So it makes me wonder if it's. I'm assuming it runs at 1080p 60. I'm not too sure, because to me it looked pretty good. I know there was some rough texture work, but I thought it looked pretty good ultimately. And it just makes me wonder if Breath of the Wild ran at 30 because it was an open world game, which very well could be the reason. But it makes me wonder if somehow the Switch will be able to run Breath of the Wild 2 at 60. I doubt it, but it'd be kind of cool.
I feel like they'll keep the frame rates the same just because that's how people are used to Breath of the Wild.
Okay.
But I feel like maybe it's in terms of resolution. I feel like how development has improved overall on the Switch. I mean, they put Doom on the Switch, and that wasn't even Nintendo themselves. So,
yeah, that was Panic Button. Panic Button's been doing a lot of really good ports.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, today on the 19th, Quake just came out on Switch today.
I did watch some of that, and that does run at 60 FPS, but
yeah, and it's crazy. It's incredible. So
yeah.
So I feel like definitely just development for the console has improved. That's why pushing a Pro system, sure, it would be cool to have extra power, but I feel like developers for Switch and Nintendo themselves have realized that there's ways to get around the hardware limitation and make the games just great and on a small file size.
That's always been Nintendo, though. It's like they don't let their hardware limitations stop them from making something great. It was the last time that Nintendo was on top or nearly on top was the GameCube, PS2, and 360 days. During that generation, the PS2 was the weakest, GameCube was second, and Xbox was strongest. A lot of people don't remember that, but that's just how that's how it was. So that's why we got games like Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube that look genuinely incredible, and they still look really good today. And but it's never been Nintendo to be like, oh, here's my beefy system or my crazy expensive console that like the PlayStation or Xbox Series X. Like I don't know if Nintendo is ever going to do that. They're always going to be doing their own thing.
Yeah, they just they have that business model where they really focus on their software is more important than their hardware. I mean, they want comfortable controls. They want a solid unit that represents them well. And once they design that, once they've made that, they focused 100% on their software, and they just release stability patches constantly for their consoles.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where, they've sold 90 million Switches. That's bonkers. The Wii
Very good.
sold 100 million, roughly. The Wii U sold 13 million, and the Switch has sold about 90 million. So look at it this way: the Wii U, 13 million was purchased by mostly hardcore gamers, people that care about like resolution and things, but also people that just care about Nintendo, obviously. But 89 million, 90 million, that's a huge majority market of that is people that don't care about resolution in that. So I think that's one thing that people tend to forget. The people like us that talk about this kind of stuff is we tend to forget sometimes that like we're not the majority, we're not the biggest fan base, or we're not the biggest group that's going to be buying these things. Like people that just want to play Breath of the Wild, and like you said, Breath of the Wild 2 be 30 FPS because it will feel the same as the first.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it just keeps that quality. It doesn't change it up and make it feel not the same as because it's a sequel, right? It's the same series. It's like if you change the controls completely of Luigi using a vacuum in Luigi's Mansion. It's like, well, why?
I think next up we are going to hit spoiler territory, so I'll put a big spoiler thing over on the screen right now. Anything from here on is free range for spoilers, so you've been warned. I think the first thing I want to cover is like the story, like just the overarching story before as we hit certain points. I think we can talk about our favorite bosses and dungeons and things, but honestly, I thought this may have been one of my favorite stories in a Zelda game. I was blown away with how much I actually liked it.
Yeah, it was a solid story. Just playing ones that were famously received in the past, comparing it with this game that didn't receive such fame for its story. It's like I'm brainwashed to say it's not as good, but it is genuinely, it's a Zelda game. It's a Zelda story.
Yeah.
It follows in line as the others. It definitely involves the motion controls into the story in terms of like how bosses are fought, how it leads up to the final battle. I feel motion controls are a big like just that. I mean, that is just combat, sure, but it's just how the characters decide to fight is all influence from motion controls to me.
Yeah,
it's
no,
just,
100%.
The story itself is a the story itself is solid. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so like just going off that motion controls comment, so like when you're fighting the imprisoned the second, well, even the first time when you're attacking his feet and making him fall over, you're using your sword, and there's all story reasons behind it, like you got to hit the seal back into his head. Or when you're fighting him the second time, you use the catapult and you motion control the catapult for story reasons. So like you're right. They did work a lot of the motion control mechanics into the story, even if indirectly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think in terms of like just raw storytelling, I thought it was a super interesting take to, we've heard the story, like you said, the same old Zelda story where it's like, oh, here's Link, here's Zelda, here's bad guy, Zelda's captured, Link saves the day. Like, but this is the same, but it's also a little different because it's the first instance of that. It's the first Link and Zelda.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to me that made it super emotional. Like the ending I thought was super emotional because you'd spent your whole time trying to go get her and trying to get strong enough to go save her. Then you realize like, oh, you can't until these other criteria are done.
Yeah, it's at the beginning of the game, she's the daughter of like the headmaster of this school?
Yeah, the headmaster, yeah.
So she's not a princess.
No, yeah, so that's
she's
just
not
it.
A princess at all in this game, or do they like refer? I'm trying to remember if they referred to her by the end.
Yeah, no, that's just it. They just refer to her, she's just Zelda. She's just the headmaster's daughter, who's picked by Hylia.
That's what it is, yeah. Because I was wondering what
that
role
starts
was
it, yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what her role was, why she was giving the sale at the start. But that's right. It's just
She was
that's her
just
role.
picked to play the role of of that. So it was like kind of like destiny setting itself up or whatever.
Dang, it should have been Groose in her place.
But again, like again, another reason why I thought this game was really good, because you take a character like Groose, who I'm like, well, in the beginning of the game I was like, screw that dude, he's a jerk. But by the end of it, he's had a character arc. He's fascinating. He's become more reasonable. Like he's actually a likable character at the very end of the game.
Yeah, and it's funny because since I never played the game, I remember having discussions with friends in school about Groose. They'd make comments like, oh, I like Groose, and I played up to the point where he was just like a horrible character, so I never got the spoiler the whole time. So like up until 2021, I never was spoiled about that Groose had this change in him. So that was a surprise to me playing through this. It was like a truly blind run for me for this game.
Well,
It was
and that's kind of
nice.
cool too, because I was aware that he had some kind of character change, because I'd listened to enough video game podcasts where they talked about it before, and I was like, okay, like, I never thought I'd play this game, so I was like, oh, whatever. But then you see it firsthand, you're like, oh my god, like that was genuinely cool. He became one of the more likable characters. And out of all of the returning like common characters, you had Zelda, Link, Groose, like the headmaster in them, and they were okay, but they were just mainly, to me, they were like exposition characters. Like they just fed you story.
That's exactly the case. Like you would just run to the headmaster, be like, "Hey," and get some more story details that would let you progress.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought that the other character, well, technically two, but it was kind of interesting how they did it, was Impa, but then also the old woman, or the old one, or whatever they called her.
Yeah.
And obviously not including villains like Girahim. Like I'm just not talking about him yet. But did like I knew it right away when I saw the old woman and I saw Impa. I was like, oh, there's the same person, same person.
Really?
Yeah,
No, that threw
instantly.
me for a loop.
Really?
Yeah.
Because you want to know what gave it away? Is if you looked at
Oh.
her character, the old woman's character, she had the big teardrop tattooed on her face.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the Impa had that,
I
and then when you
didn't.
saw,
I couldn't see her face. I thought.
you can see part of her face. You can't see her whole face. You can see like from her part of her nose down, but it's enough where you can see a little teardrop part of the tattoo. And I was like, oh my god, it's her.
When I play games, I never encounter things like that ever, and it's frustrating because I don't guess I'm just not observant. So it's like I never get like those hints. I always get I'm always that like audience that's whoa, I didn't know. No
And see,
way.
I'm the annoying one, the audience, who then when everyone reacts like that, I'm like, I saw that like 25 minutes ago. Like I saw it coming. Outside of the main cast, like I thought all of them were great. Like I said, Groose was really fun. Link is Link. But I thought Girahim was really freaking weird. I thought he was the weirdest villain I've ever had in a game.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy they made comments about his hair. I did in the dialogue. Did you make the comment like making fun of his hair or whatever?
I can't remember. I'll have to go back and play that section of the game. I can't remember. I think I probably did though.
I said like, oh, like it was like nice hair, like you and your hair bug off or something like that. Yeah. It's good.
That is one part of the game. It's directly related to story that I totally forgot about. Was that you did get dialogue options in this game, which is really weird for a Zelda game.
True. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it ultimately affected too much, but it was still really cool that was an option.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like it would give you the same result either way, but it's yeah, it's nice. It's it adds personality. That's what it does.
Yeah, totally. It gives your Link you're playing as their own personality and how they would address certain things.
Hmm.
And speaking of your Link, when you played through, did you just name your character Link?
Yeah, I believe I did. Yes.
I'm one of those weird people. I named it Tyler.
So like, I would name it Josh the if I knew someone else that would be playing on my console. But otherwise,
Oh,
I
okay.
just that's what it is. That's how I usually play it.
Okay.
So I would name it Josh if I knew there would be another player on
Like
the
if I
same.
played on the same system or something.
Yep, as like
Okay.
save file too. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, cool. Yeah. So I don't. I thought the story was pretty compelling all the way through, building up and creating the Master Sword. Fee actually not being annoying, which I heard she was really annoying in the first Wii version.
Yeah, I think in this, I don't know for sure because I don't know the Wii version very well, but I think that whenever you referred to Fee, it where it says like advice or objective and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I I don't think that was in the Wii version. Instead, I think she just spammed you like Navi did.
Oh, okay.
I believe that's how it was just done before. And instead in this game it just kind of flashed your sword but didn't say anything. Didn't force
Yeah,
the
yeah.
sword
It
to
just
come out.
went bling. You heard a different sound. Yeah, it
Yeah.
chimed at you. So I guess with kind of the story run through roughly, obviously we can't cover everything. You know, you had the dragons. You learned just different songs because there's always music in part of Zelda games. I'm curious how this stacks up to what you consider your favorite Zelda game to be.
That's a tough one. uh, so you mentioned before I like Majora's Mask, but I think Ocarina of Time is just classic.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say that's my favorite, but I mean Majora's Mask, it's tied. They're just, and I'm hoping Breath of the Wild 2 is the same as Breath of the Wild. They make it just a little bit a few new elements and make the game just as fan favorited as the other. But in terms of this one, maybe fourth favorite.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it still is like a solid Zelda game. Yeah, it just I think that my experience in the past has affected my stance on it today.
Yeah, because I agree. Ocarina of Time, classic. It's the first Zelda game I played. I'm pretty sure it's the first one you played.
Hmm.
And it's just one of those ones that will always stand out. But for me, Twilight Princess is always and forever one of my favorites. And I probably put this up there with Twilight Princess. In terms of story impact, though, I think this was more of an impactful story. Maybe it's just I pay attention to story stuff more so now than I used to. But I really do put this up there. I think it's probably in the top. Like I said, like I agree with you. Top 4, top 3. It definitely was a surprise for me.
Do you want to talk about the dungeons?
Yeah. Let's try and I guess we can wrap it up with what our favorite dungeons and what our favorite areas and bosses were. So
Yeah,
I'll let you take it away. You can start with all your favorites.
Well, I just want to talk about my complaint first. That's
Oh,
why.
okay. Let's hear it.
So, I didn't really have to look up too much in the game as I played through it, but I did look up the first dungeon. You have to trigger some switches at the start of the or like in the middle of the dungeon. And there's this one switch where after you go through the first room on the left and you swam under the water and triggered the switch, changed to the water level, I was like, what the heck do I do now? There's nothing else I can do. I'm like running around the whole place and I couldn't find what to do. I was swimming in everywhere I could. The thing is that there's one switch hidden underneath a bridge in that like main room. And it's hidden in like a wall. It's like inside the wall underneath the bridge, and my camera never was like going under the bridge for me. It was only like going like top down view kind of. So I could never see it. And it's so frustrating because I looked it up and I'm just in just some random walkthrough and I'm just like, well, there we go. That's the easiest solution in the world, but I had to look it up. I had to
I'm right
break
there
my
with no, I'm right there with you
immersion.
because I know exactly the button you're talking about where you you went in there, swam under, climbed up those vines, activated the button, and then you're stuck. You're like, how the heck do I get over to the other side, right? Because within that same room, you weren't able to get to the other side, right? Is that the same
Yeah,
area you're
yeah, yeah.
talking
Oh,
about?
you couldn't get to like, you couldn't get to the vines or something.
Yeah, or so. Yeah. I'm kind of misremembering because it's been a little while since I finished it, but yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about because I remember sitting there and like, what the crap? And I remember you told me that going into it, and I was like, oh my god, this is what he was talking about. Like, where the heck is it?
So that was like one of the few things I had to look up in this,
Yeah,
and I
because the
felt so
game.
stupid.
No. I don't think that was on us. I think that's literally just one of the few instances of poor level design or poor game design or just poor communication to the player because most of the other dungeons, it's not that they're easy, they're just well designed where they flow well into each other and it's satisfying to finish dungeon after dungeon or not dungeon but area after area because I think my favorite area or favorite dungeon was I can't remember the name of it, but it was the dungeon with the dead bokoblins in it,
Oh, okay.
like the
Yeah.
zombie bokoblins.
Where
I
you had to
think
like
that was
climb up that rope.
yeah. You had to climb up the rope and they chased you up the rope. Yeah, that was. I
Yeah.
think that was my favorite dungeon. I loved that dungeon. And is that the same dungeon where you fought the boss with a bunch of arms?
Yes, it is. And
Oh,
that's the
100%. 100%. That's my favorite boss.
this is that dungeon where I had that complaint about that whip earlier.
Okay, I knew exactly. Yeah, it was the point where you just jumped off the spinning platform or whatever, or it
And
was
then you
like the
had to
big
rotate the
wheel,
direction.
and you had to rotate the direction. Yeah, I knew that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, I jumped off and I was on this platform with this thing. I could see that there was something there, so I whipped it. Nothing happened, so I was like, well, whatever, and I just hopped back down, ran back around and everything, and then I had to look it up, and I was like, I was there.
I loved that dungeon. I thought that was like my favorite dungeon, and probably it's probably been one of my favorite dungeons in most Zelda games. I don't know what it was, but something about the way it was laid out, the kind of creepy atmosphere, and then the final boss. I absolutely loved that boss. Being able to rip its arms off with the whip, and then beat it up with its own sword.
Yeah, I agree. That one was creative. I just couldn't imagine doing that with motion controls, to be honest.
You know, and I thought the same thing. It actually wasn't bad. It was pretty easy because when it comes to swinging, like spamming the swing on your sword, you can kind of do it like how you did the sword combat in Wii Sports Resort, where you could just kind of like shake it, and Link will go and like just swing his sword a bunch.
Oh, okay.
So you can also get away with doing that.
So my favorite dungeon was probably the whole sand ship area, both the one that you had to ride the minecarts on. I love that, and then the one you had to like the invisible one, because both I enjoyed the fighting of the like the what is it, robot pirate or whatever, you had to head off the ship, but then also that Kraken boss. I just thought the creativity of the tentacles going through the walls and everything, and was just so creative. And then at the end, it was like, this looks like a friendly Kraken, just from how it looks. It looks like a Monsters Inc. character.
Yeah, no, that's funny. That's super funny. That's exactly what I would have thought too.
Yeah, that's why that's my favorite.
I actually got so upset at that boss though. Because
Really?
because two things. One, motion control made me so mad because you had to do a lot of those skyward strikes to cut off its tentacles.
Oh, see, I didn't even cut off any tentacles. I just avoided them. Oh, at the end. Well, no, I don't. Never mind, you did. But I didn't use skyward strikes. I just walked.
When they stuck up through the ground, didn't you have to use a skyward strike to charge up your sword and cut them off?
No, you could just cut them off normally just by a horizontal swing.
What?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that's how I had to do it.
Well, that's how I did it, at least. I don't remember. I thought it was just that you had to do a Skyward Strike, but
No,
regardless, that's how I was doing it, and I was getting really upset because the whole thing I mentioned before, where Link wouldn't put his sword straight up in the air if you didn't recenter it all the time, and because you're doing so much movement, you had to just constantly keep recentering it, and just it kept getting super annoying. And then the other thing I ran into was once I shot it in the eye with the bow, running up to it, I was like, how do I damage it? What the heck do I didn't realize you had to run up and start hitting its eye.
I see.
So I went through like 3 cycles of just hitting it and like it falling over and then going back. I was like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah, so I think you could just cut its tentacles off horizontally, just normal slashes. But then, yeah, when I got into the hang, I really just stayed right in the front, right towards him, and just shot him in the eye and just waited right underneath where he'd fall. It was like that was just a quick thing for me, but it could have also just been a motion control thing. Maybe when you tried hitting it initially, didn't cut or something. The tentacles.
Yeah, and honestly, that could have been what it was. But I found using the Skyward Strike made it a little bit easier because I was able to actually attack his tentacles from a distance, and I could hit multiple at once too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably convenient with that Skyward Strike.
But I really did like the area you're talking about though for your favorite dungeon, because it had all those time crystal things where you could go back and forth between times.
Actually, that's the funny thing. I didn't really care for for the time crystals.
Oh, really?
In the game. Yeah, I don't know. It's just the whole you have to set off this trigger, do this, set off this one to turn it off. I don't know. It's not my favorite kind of game mechanic. Okay. But I thought the environment, just like the sandy area, was cool. I liked the time crystal where you triggered it and were on the boat and it would be water around you, and then sand everywhere else. That was cool.
That was really cool. Yeah, that felt like going back to Wind Waker again.
Yeah, this is where like we were talking about how just all the games blend together. It's like Wind Waker is represented by like the boat in that.
Yeah, 100%.
Breath of the Wild elements. There's Breath of the Wild was after, but there's the Twilight Princess kind of mechanics with just
that little robot bringing things to places.
That's what it is. Yeah, the robot that kind of traveled and picked stuff up for you is like the teleporting the bridge in Twilight Princess at the start, or just everything else later. That kind of how Midna would do that for you, just teleport it.
Yeah, and even elements of Ocarina of Time, where this game, I mean, it doesn't directly tie into it because there was in the Zelda timeline, there's more games in between. But how, they create the Master Sword and then put it back into the pedestal, and how there's all the goddesses give you a sacred flame, and it's just how it just all ties together. And I feel like this is the one game in the series that just brings everything together in a nice little bow. And then Breath of the Wild said, thanks for doing all that. I'm going to take the best pieces and aspects of all of them and make something brand new.
Yeah, exactly. There's that Temple of Time in that game too, but it doesn't really play a role. It's all broken.
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah.
And it's just interesting because I'm curious if we're gonna get a game before this too. I mean, it kind of makes sense, but
well, so I mean, that's just it. It's like I don't know if you could though, because these were the first, unless you're playing as the goddesses or something like that, you wouldn't be playing as Link and Zelda, because these are the first Link and Zelda.
Gonna be Impa the game.
Impa the game, yeah. Yeah, anything. I mean, it would be really cool to see anything that would explain the Sheikah a little bit more.
True.
Yeah, I don't know. Ultimately, I thought this was a pretty great game. I don't really like giving scores, but I feel like it's definitely a must-play. People should check out. Especially if you didn't give it a chance on the Wii.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy. I committed to finishing it with the controls and everything, because it definitely is that is it definitely is a Zelda game. It follows the Zelda formula that it always was there before Breath of the Wild. It follows that traditional Zelda path while explaining story of how the origins are and uh, just the mechanics were good.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it better. It kind of is a shame that we might not see another Zelda like this unless we get a you know, a Link to the Past style or a retelling or something of one of the. So like there's rumors that the Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons might be coming out, so we may get more Zelda that's like this original Zelda. But I think for future games, Breath of the Wild forward, I think it's going to be mainly open world, at least for the time being.
I don't know. The way I think about it is that maybe on the next hardware when it's more powerful, they might stay with this same kind of formula but just focus on visuals.
Yeah,
That could be
yeah,
a thing.
yeah. Who knows? It's going to be interesting. It's always fun to be a Zelda fan because there's always something coming out. There's always something.
Hmm. That's true. I agree with that.
But you have any final words? Anything you want to share?
No, I say finish the game. Uh, Hero mode is something that is definitely something I would consider going back and doing too. Maybe not right after you finish the game. So that's kind of how I'm doing it. Is I didn't. I finished the basic game now, but when the OLED Switch comes out, it'll probably be a game I play through again, but in hero mode. It's
Okay.
it's another reason to play through the game is playing it handheld mode again on the OLED display, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No.
But
100%.
but it definitely Zelda games are I believe are more fun on the hero mode setting just because it adds that extra challenge, especially when in this case where hero mode is unlocked after you finish the game. It's not just available at the start.
Yeah.
It definitely makes it extends the length of the experience and just is a great time.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. I've never really jumped into the hero mode of games too terribly much, or like the new game plus. I'm not too into that, but I may check it out because I know it is a nice new challenge, and spending $60 on a game, and I played about 31 hours worth. I don't know how long your playthrough was, but it's a pretty good worthwhile amount of time. But you can always get more. Yeah, I think that about wraps up. So thanks for joining, everyone. I had a good time. I don't really know what game we're gonna do next. Probably have to figure that out.
Yeah. Maybe
Gotta-
something not Nintendo related. Maybe something. I don't know.
Maybe something on Game Pass, because that's something we
Game
both have.
Pass. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I have everything but PC just because I have all consoles basically.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we could always pick something on PS5 or something. So yeah, I don't know. We'll figure that out. Like I said in my like little trailer video, these are gonna be kind of whenever we feel like kind of uploads. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below, because that's the thing people say.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly. All right. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.
Yep.